Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the new opportunities, but I am going to tell you a little bit about our business. Our business essentially, and has been for some time, has been tungsten, and we like tungsten. It's a business that it's a very hard metal. It's also a difficult metal to work with, but we're blessed with it. We have a bit of copper. I won't tell you much about copper, what copper is used for. David did a pretty good job of that earlier on this evening, so I won't waste time on that. The thing about tungsten, it has gone up. The tungsten price has gone up about 50% so far this year. A year or two ago, when we were trying to find project finance for one of our projects, the price kept on going down, and we eventually decided that wasn't going to get work right then. The price is coming up now. It's looking pretty good, and hopefully that augurs well for project finance in the not too distant future. The other thing about that we can perhaps talk about is we've stopped exploring by to a large margin. Our core projects are at the stage where exploration dollars are no longer required. We're on the development and the commercialisation path. That doesn't mean we'll never be explorers again, because as Zach said, we've got we're on the lookout for a couple of new things right now, and that might change the dynamic, but the core projects we have now, the exploration spend is complete. Tungsten. For those of you who don't know much about tungsten, it is the hardest metal known. And I think most metals now are. I don't think there's too many more going to be found or discovered. It's got a very, very high melting, boiling points. I think the melting point's about 3,400 degrees C. Very corrosion resistant. There are very few substitutes for tungsten in the things that it does. It is basically a commodity that is used in business, in construction, in wear parts for in machinery, drilling bits, cutting tools, things of that nature. When the world economy is growing, people are using tungsten. Most people like to have an asset that's in production. We don't have one yet. We're moving towards that with Molyhil, and we think also with Kapunda Copper not too far away. Pilot Mountain in the we have a resource now. We're now moving towards feasibility on that, and as Zach said, we do have a new project or two that may be in the pipeline. Talking firstly about Molyhil. Someone said earlier on tonight that nearby infrastructure was a really core ingredient for their project. That doesn't work at Molyhil. It's right in the centre of Australia. It's about 1,000 miles from the nearest port of any substance. That's a mark against Molyhil. What we do have at Molyhil, though, is a project that has had a feasibility done. It has the environmental approval to do that. It has the approval from the Aboriginal traditional owners to go ahead with this thing. This one's ready to go. It's ready for project finance. The tungsten price at the moment, I've got at $285 a metric tonne unit, which is 10 kilos. Tungsten's quite a valuable material. Our operating cost on the feasibility study that we completed a couple of years ago is at about 112. That's a fair margin to get things wrong along the way and to make a profit from. What is new at Molyhil is that we are now going through and doing an upgrade to our ore reserve. We did some more technical work on something called ore sorting in the last few months, and have managed to upgrade the ore as it comes out of the ground after crushing, before it gets into the most expensive part of the plant to build and to operate, the milling and the flotation circuits. On the back of that, we have started recalculating the ore reserve. We believe that more of the ore in the ground that was a little too low grade to come out to go through the plant, or was a little bit deeper, can now make that ore reserve, which will extend the life of Molyhil. And that improvement in ore reserve should be out before Christmas. Now I know Christmas is getting pretty close, but I'm reasonably confident that that's still doable. Following the publishing of that ore reserve, we will then work on an upgrade to our definitive feasibility study, and I would think that should be out sometime around towards the end of the March quarter next year. After that, we go looking for finance for Molyhil. We get finance. We're looking for somewhere around 40 million US dollars. It's not a huge amount, but when you've got a market cap of 15 million pounds, it's still something that can't be sneezed at. So there's still a job in hand, but we think it's doable. Some of this stuff is still dated. A year or so ago, Northland put out a forecast of the tungsten price going forward, and that says that that said in 2016 that we would be somewhere around here about now, and they got it right. If they're right with their further forecast, this is a pretty happy time for tungsten. If you look at the stuff on the right hand side, the line across the top is our costs. The bars are the revenue. Molyhil is quite high grade near surface, and therefore the returns and the payback on capital are very, very quick, which is a good place to be. Moving on, Pilot Mountain in Nevada in the United States. There we have the infrastructure that David, I think, might have been talking about earlier on. We have, we're about half an hour from the main road. We've got mains power about 5 or 6 kilometres away. We've got a water supply just there. We've got a town close by where the workforce will drive in and out for. They're things that make a mining project much easier and cheaper to develop. This is just off the main road between Reno and Vegas. A couple of our investors here tonight have been there to see it. Pilot Mountain is a mountain. There's a bit of topography there, and in its own way, it's got a place with a bit of visual charm, but it's a pretty harsh part of the world in many ways. A resource estimate on 2 of the 4 deposits. The main one at Desert Shearlight has 26,000 tonnes of contained WO3. Now, and this stuff is worth about $30,000 a tonne. This is not. This is a resource with a value of some substance. There's also a couple of hundred tonnes of silver and about 14,000 tonnes of copper. And the next resource at Garnet, about 3 kilometres away, slightly smaller, higher grade. In total, we've got an inventory here at Pilot Mountain of about 32,000 tonnes of contained tungsten. And we've stopped exploring, not because we think there's no more there. This will more than double, we firmly believe, but this is enough to get a mining project going with a life for 15, 20 years. The rest of it will turn up later on. Let's start turning it into a mine rather than continue to try and grow the resource. Drilling activities this year, in fact, we finished the last job in August of this year on Desert Shearlight, the largest of the 2 deposits that have a resource. Came up with something that validated a theory we'd had for some time. Each of the other 3 deposits at Pilot Mountain have 3 layers of mineralisation, roughly parallel to one another. At Desert Shearlight and at Good Hope, we'll see in a minute, they are vertical, a bit like the books lined up on this imaginary bookshelf. And at the other 2, they are more horizontal, sitting on top of one another. What we found at Desert Shearlight in this latest drilling program was we do have the extra zones of mineralisation. We've just taken a while to find it. We've had to step back, drill a bit deeper and from out a bit. And so we have potentially got to the stage where we can double the size of the resource at Desert Shearlight from what is currently known. We're not going to drill that any further. We can bank that for later on. This is where it is on a scale of how far apart they are. The 2 deposits on the eastern side, Desert Shearlight and Good Hope, as I said before, they are vertical zones of mineralisation. Those on the west, Garnet and Gunmetal, are more horizontal. Garnet starts at 5 metres from the surface. This is going to be a very, very cheap mine to run for a start. Garnet's got a resource of about 1.8 million tonnes. There's probably 3 years of open cut mining there at Garnet before we move on to Good Hope, then on to Desert Shearlight. There's probably 7 or 8 years of open cut life before we think we need to go anything like moving towards underground mining. That's the end of the tungsten story. for now. In South Australia, we have just invested in the Kapunda copper deposit. Kapunda is about an hour and a half north of Adelaide, where I happen to live, and it is an historical copper mine that was being mined in the late 1800s. They were pulling out 30% ore from this place, putting on a ship, sending it back here to the UK to put through smelting and refining operations here. It closed down in the early 1900s. Copper is just a wonderful metal to be in. It's a fabulous metal to be in. David told you about the growth that you are expecting in the copper market in the next few years. I endorse that. The thing that he didn't say about the copper business is that I don't believe, and he may correct me, I don't believe there are any new large copper mines scheduled to come on stream anytime soon. The consumption of copper is going to go through the roof. The production of copper is not going to go through the roof. CRU were talking about the price of copper at a conference in Adelaide earlier on this year, going from then it was about the low $6,000 a tonne up to $8,000 a tonne. It's now about $6,800 a tonne, give or take a bit. I'm very confident that the $8,000 a tonne is quite doable. The process at Kapunda is not standard mining. It is right on the edge of town, and if we were to do an open cut mine at Kapunda, we would cut the sides of the old pit back, and we would cut out half the main street, the local primary school and a couple of pubs. That's not going to work. What we have here at Kapunda is oxidised ore in ground that appears amenable to in situ leaching techniques, which is very, very cheap mining. And we are going through the process now. We will have a resource estimate out on Kapunda, I think this side of Christmas. We will have, and then we will start next year on some field recovery work to demonstrate to ourselves and to the market that this in situ leaching mechanism doesn't just work in uranium, because half the world's uranium is produced in this manner, but it also works in copper. In situ leaching of copper takes place in Arizona in the States and also in Russia. It is not yet a common production method for copper. In South Australia, we are a bit of a home or a centre of expertise for in situ leaching, because there are 2 in situ leaching uranium mines already in action in South Australia. They have been going for about 15 years or so. Part of the team working on this are people who have been in that business for quite some time. This is quite doable. We need to demonstrate it to ourselves, but we know the minerals can leach. By looking at the rocks in the core, there's a very good. It appears to have a very good chance of working in the field. We have to demonstrate that, and that's our process for the next year or so. Kapunda there is buckets and buckets of drilling into Kapunda. We've had to do none of that. All this is historical. A lot of the core from Kapunda is available in the Mines Department facility in Adelaide. We've seen that, we've looked at it, we've worked with it. We don't have to do any more drilling. That work has been done, and the resource assessment will be out shortly. The program there says, and I'm ripping through this now, that by the end of 2018 or into 2019, we could be looking for development approval. The thing that will take extra time at Kapunda is the social licence, not the technical stuff. The next steps for these assets: Molyhil, ore reserve upgrade, feasibility study upgrade, and then off to finance for development. Pilot Mountain, we're moving into scoping studies, then feasibility and development permitting. Kapunda will have a resource estimate out quite soon, and then into field recovery work. And I think I've run out of time. Thank you.